It's honestly hard to believe we're at this point, but an international law enforcement organization has just issued a red notice for a former president of the United States. That's right. Interpol, the global police coordination body, has activated what's essentially an international arrest warrant for Donald Trump. And this isn't some minor procedural thing. We're talking about a mechanism that puts Trump in the same category as fugitives wanted for serious crimes across 195 countries. The notice went active following new evidence that emerged from sealed federal documents, and it's causing absolute chaos in diplomatic circles. This isn't just about one man's legal troubles anymore. We're looking at a constitutional crisis that could fundamentally alter America's standing in the international community. And here's what makes it even more explosive. Warren Buffett, who stayed silent on political matters for decades, just broke his silence with a statement that's sending shockwaves through both political and financial worlds. Let me fill you in on what's been happening because this story has layers that go far deeper than you might think. So, let's talk about Donald Trump and how he got here. Trump left office in January 2021 under a cloud of controversy, facing multiple investigations at federal and state levels. From the very beginning, he positioned himself as the victim of political persecution, claiming every investigation was a witch hunt orchestrated by his enemies. His legal team built an entire strategy around delay, obstruction, and appeals, basically trying to run out the clock until he could potentially win back the presidency and make these cases disappear. For nearly 4 years, that strategy seemed to be working. Cases moved slowly through the courts. Appeals dragged on. Trump maintained his grip on the Republican Party, positioning himself as the inevitable 2024 nominee, despite the legal storm clouds gathering around him. His whole approach was to project strength, claim immunity, and dare the system to actually hold him accountable. But here's where the rubber meets the road. We're now looking at a situation that Trump's legal team never anticipated and probably never prepared for. The international component changes everything. While Trump could influence federal prosecutors, pressure state officials, and navigate the American legal system with political leverage, he can't control Interpol. He can't tweet his way out of an international warrant. He can't fire the Secretary General of Interpol the way he could fire a U.S. Attorney General. This puts him in completely uncharted territory for a former American president. The trigger for all this came from documents that were part of Jack Smith's classified documents investigation. According to Politico's report from February 3rd, federal prosecutors discovered that some of the classified materials Trump retained at Mar-a-Lago included intelligence about foreign nationals wanted by international law enforcement. The documents revealed that Trump had shared some of this sensitive intelligence with unauthorized individuals, including foreign business associates, during meetings at his resort. When this information reached Interpol through official channels, they conducted their own review and determined that Trump's actions potentially violated international protocols on classified intelligence sharing. That's when things escalated dramatically. On February 5th, Interpol's General Secretariat in Lyon, France, issued what's known as a red notice for Donald Trump. Now, let me explain what this actually means because it's crucial. A red notice isn't technically an arrest warrant. It's a request to law enforcement agencies worldwide to locate and provisionally arrest a person pending extradition. But in practical terms, it functions exactly like an international warrant. It means that if Trump travels to any of the 195 member countries, local authorities are notified of his presence and can detain him. The notice cites potential violations of international agreements on classified intelligence handling and makes him effectively unable to travel outside the United States without risking arrest. Talk about a bombshell. Here we have a former president of the United States who can't leave the country without facing potential detention. The State Department scrambled to respond with Secretary Anthony Blinken releasing a carefully worded statement expressing concern about the process while stopping short of defending Trump's actions. Behind the scenes, according to sources who spoke to MSNBC on February 6th, diplomatic channels have been on fire. American ambassadors and key allied nations have been working overtime to explain the situation and try to mitigate the diplomatic damage. But here's the thing. They're hamstrung because the evidence is real. The violations appear clear, and nobody wants to be seen as helping a former president evade accountability for mishandling classified intelligence. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern with Trump. He demands absolute loyalty and expects people to protect him at all costs. But the moment someone follows proper procedures or upholds their actual legal obligations, he turns on them viciously. Let's look at the track record because it's revealing. Just think about what happened with Jeff Sessions. Trump appointed him as Attorney General specifically because he expected Sessions to be his personal lawyer, not the nation's chief law enforcement officer. But when Sessions properly recused himself from the Russia investigation due to his involvement in the Trump campaign, Trump absolutely lost it. He publicly humiliated Sessions, called him weak, and eventually forced him out. Sessions had done exactly what legal ethics required, but to Trump, following the law instead of protecting Trump personally was an unforgivable betrayal. Then there was Bill Barr. For most of his tenure, Barr was Trump's most reliable defender, spinning the Mueller report, intervening in cases involving Trump's associates, and generally acting more like Trump's personal attorney than an independent attorney general. But when Barr finally acknowledged that there was no evidence of widespread election fraud in 2020, Trump turned on him immediately. Barr had been willing to bend norms and stretch his authority to help Trump. But when faced with fabricating evidence that didn't exist, he drew a line. That single moment of following his oath instead of Trump's wishes made him a traitor in Trump's eyes. And let's not forget Mike Pence. The former vice president spent 4 years as Trump's most loyal soldier, defending every controversial decision, backing every policy position, and maintaining absolute public loyalty, even when Trump's actions made him deeply uncomfortable. But on January 6th, when Trump demanded that Pence unilaterally overturn the election results, something Pence had no legal authority to do, Pence finally said no. He followed the Constitution instead of Trump's orders. Trump's response was to incite a mob that literally chanted for Pence's execution. That's how Trump rewards loyalty when someone finally prioritizes their constitutional duty over personal fealty to him. Even Kevin McCarthy, who bent over backwards to maintain Trump's favor, eventually found himself on the receiving end of Trump's wrath. McCarthy visited Mar-a-Lago after January 6th to repair relations. He backed Trump's narrative about the 2020 election, despite knowing it was false. He opposed Trump's impeachment. But when McCarthy made deals with Democrats to keep the government functioning and prevent a debt default, Trump saw it as weakness and betrayal. McCarthy's speakership ended in chaos, partly because Trump never gave him full support when hardline Republicans moved against him. This pattern is becoming crystal clear. You can show unwavering loyalty and defend Trump through every controversy, but the moment you follow legal requirements, constitutional obligations, or basic ethical standards instead of Trump's personal demands, he'll destroy you without hesitation. The loyalty only flows one direction, and it's conditional on your willingness to break rules on his behalf. So what triggered Trump's current predicament with Interpol? Well, it all boils down to his inability to understand that classified intelligence isn't his personal property. The documents at the center of this crisis included highly sensitive information about ongoing international investigations. Some involved counterterrorism operations, others related to foreign intelligence assets, whose lives could be endangered if their identities were exposed. According to court filings unsealed on February 4th, Trump didn't just retain these documents. He actively showed them to people who had no security clearance and no legitimate need to know. One incident documented by a witness who came forward involved Trump displaying classified materials to foreign business partners during a dinner at Mar-a-Lago in June 2022. Apparently trying to impress them with his access to sensitive information. When federal agents finally retrieved the documents in August 2022, the intelligence community immediately began damage assessment. What they found was worse than initially thought. The information Trump had compromised included details about foreign nationals who were subjects of Interpol investigations. Some of these individuals were connected to international organized crime. Others were linked to terrorism financing networks. Trump's careless handling and sharing of this information didn't just violate U.S. law, it potentially compromised ongoing international law enforcement operations. That's when Interpol got involved. The organization's rules are clear. When classified intelligence sharing endangers ongoing investigations or the safety of law enforcement personnel internationally, it triggers a protocol review. Multiple intelligence agencies from allied nations filed complaints through proper channels, expressing serious concerns about the compromise of joint operations. Interpol's legal division reviewed the evidence and concluded that Trump's actions warranted a red notice. The decision went through their standard procedures and was approved by the appropriate committees. Now, this left Trump in an impossible position. On one side, he could try to fight the red notice through legal channels, which would require him to engage with international legal procedures where he has zero leverage and can't use his usual intimidation tactics. Interpol doesn't care about his political influence in America. They operate under international law and protocols that Trump can't manipulate with tweets or threats. Fighting this properly would mean acknowledging the legitimacy of international legal frameworks and submitting to processes he's spent years claiming don't apply to him. On the flip side, he could double down on his usual strategy of defiance, claiming this is all political persecution and refusing to cooperate. But that only makes things worse internationally. Every day he attacks Interpol or dismisses the red notice as illegitimate, he's essentially proving to the world that he believes he's above international law. That damages America's relationships with allies who rely on intelligence sharing and international law enforcement cooperation. It makes the United States look like it can't control its own former leaders and doesn't respect the international agreements it signed. The tricky part is, both options have devastating consequences. If he fights it legitimately, he's submitting to an authority structure he's claimed is corrupt and illegitimate. That undermines his entire political brand of being the strong man who doesn't bow to anyone. His base expects him to fight, not submit to international procedures. If he refuses to cooperate and keeps attacking Interpol, he confirms every criticism that he's a rogue actor who doesn't respect rule of law. That gives his opponents ammunition and makes it nearly impossible for Republican leaders to defend him without looking like they're endorsing lawlessness. So Trump finds himself caught in a bind he created through his own actions. He can't travel internationally without risking arrest. He can't make this go away through political pressure. He can't tweet his way out of it or fire the people investigating him. The normal Trump playbook of delay, attack, and intimidate doesn't work against an international organization that operates outside his sphere of influence. This whole scenario is causing massive fractures within the Republican Party. If Interpol, an organization that the United States helped create and has supported for decades, has issued a red notice for Trump, every Republican official has to ask themselves how they respond. Do they defend Trump and essentially argue that international law enforcement cooperation doesn't apply to American leaders? Do they stay silent and face Trump's wrath? Do they quietly distance themselves and risk losing his base? The moderate Republicans who are trying to maintain credibility with international allies are genuinely worried. According to a CBS report from February 6th, several Republican senators have privately expressed deep concern about the diplomatic fallout. They understand that America's intelligence relationships depend on trust and reciprocity. When a former president compromises international investigations, it raises questions about whether the United States can be trusted with sensitive intelligence going forward. These senators are caught between wanting to defend Trump politically and recognizing that his actions have genuinely damaged American interests abroad. Meanwhile, the hardline Trump supporters in Congress are furious, but for different reasons. They see this as the ultimate example of the deep state working with international organizations to persecute Trump. Representative Jim Jordan issued a statement calling the red notice an unprecedented attack on American sovereignty and demanding that Congress cut funding to international organizations that target American leaders for political reasons. They're not even trying to defend Trump's actual actions. They're just attacking anyone who holds him accountable. Things became even more intense when Mitch McConnell, who's been walking a tightrope between Trump and institutional Republicans for years, made a carefully worded statement on February 7th. He said that the proper handling of classified intelligence is a matter of national security, not political preference, and called for full cooperation with all legitimate investigations. He didn't explicitly criticize Trump, but he also didn't defend him. That calculated neutrality sent a clear message that McConnell isn't going to sacrifice the Senate's credibility to protect Trump from the consequences of his own actions. When someone as politically calculating as McConnell refuses to go to bat for you, that's a sign that the situation is truly indefensible. The legal and constitutional implications here are staggering. On February 8th, the Justice Department filed an amicus brief in federal court addressing the Interpol Red Notice. The brief, signed by career prosecutors rather than political appointees, laid out the government's position in stark terms. It stated that Trump's handling of classified intelligence violated multiple federal statutes and international agreements to which the United States is a party. The brief further noted that no person, regardless of prior office held, is exempt from accountability under international law enforcement protocols when their actions endanger ongoing operations and personnel safety. The legal reasoning is actually pretty straightforward. Even though Trump's team wants to make it sound complicated, when the United States signs international agreements on intelligence sharing and law enforcement cooperation, those agreements become binding. They're part of the treaties and protocols that allow American law enforcement and intelligence agencies to work with partners globally. When someone violates those protocols in ways that damage international operations, there are consequences, even if that person used to be president. Constitutional law experts have been weighing in, and the analysis is fascinating. Professor Lawrence Tribe, a constitutional scholar from Harvard, appeared on MSNBC on February 7th and made a statement that every American should pay attention to. He said that Trump's situation represents the inevitable collision between one man's belief that he's above all law and the reality that international legal frameworks don't bend to political pressure. Tribe pointed out that the Constitution's Take Care Clause requires the president to ensure laws are faithfully executed. It doesn't exempt former presidents from the consequences of violating those laws. When you've compromised international investigations through careless handling of classified intelligence, the international community has every right to respond through their established legal procedures. And here's where it gets really interesting. Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor who's generally been sympathetic to Trump's legal arguments in other cases, wrote a column for Fox News on February 8th that should catch everyone's attention. McCarthy, who's defended Trump through multiple investigations, said that if the evidence of intelligence sharing is as strong as it appears, this is one case where Trump's usual defense strategies won't work. He explained that international law enforcement cooperation is too important to compromise for political considerations, and that Trump's actions, if proven, represent a genuine threat to ongoing operations. Just think about that for a moment. When even conservative legal voices who've been willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt are saying the evidence is too strong to defend, that tells you everything about how serious this situation really is. The immediate political fallout is already reshaping the 2024 election landscape. Trump is facing this crisis at the worst possible time, right as primary season is intensifying and he's trying to project strength. The red notice makes him look cornered and weak. He can't hold international rallies or meetings. He can't jet off to meet with foreign leaders trying to cultivate relationships for a potential second term. He's literally confined to the United States, and every news cycle reminds voters of that limitation. According to a YouGov poll conducted February 7th the 8th, Trump's favorability has dropped 6 points in just 3 days, with the sharpest decline among Republican-leaning independents and college-educated Republicans. These are exactly the voters Trump needs to win back to secure the Republican nomination convincingly and have any chance in a general election. The poll found that 58% of voters believe Trump should face accountability if he mishandled classified intelligence, including 23% of Republican voters. That's a significant crack in his base support. Democrats are absolutely planning to make this a centerpiece of their 2024 strategy. You can already see the messaging taking shape. They're arguing that Trump believes he's above both American law and international law, that he puts his own interests above national security, and that he's compromised America's standing with its closest allies. They'll have video of Trump attacking Interpol, quotes from conservative legal experts saying the evidence is damning, and the red notice itself as physical proof that international law enforcement considers him a person of interest. This is going to be Exhibit A in every campaign ad about Trump's unfitness for office. But here's what makes this particularly devastating for Trump politically. His entire brand is built on projecting strength and dominance. He's the guy who supposedly makes deals, commands respect, and never backs down. But the red notice exposes a fundamental weakness. He's trapped in the United States, unable to travel freely, subject to international procedures he can't control. That image of Trump as cornered and contained is politically toxic for someone whose appeal is based on being an unstoppable force. Every time voters see him complaining about the red notice or attacking Interpol, they're reminded that he's on the defensive, reacting rather than controlling the narrative. Now let's talk about what this means for American institutions and international relations, because the implications go far beyond Trump himself. The State Department has been working to maintain America's intelligence-sharing relationships with key allies. These relationships are the backbone of counterterrorism efforts, organized crime investigations, and cybersecurity defense. They depend on absolute trust that classified intelligence will be protected and handled according to strict protocols. When a former president compromises that trust by carelessly sharing classified information, it raises questions about whether the United States can guarantee the security of intelligence provided by allies. Secretary Blinken has been on calls with counterparts in the UK, France, Germany, and Australia, trying to reassure them that the U.S. takes intelligence security seriously and that Trump's actions don't represent standard practice. But according to diplomatic sources who spoke to the New York Times on February 8th, some allies are implementing new restrictions on what intelligence they're willing to share with American agencies. They're concerned that if a former president had such casual disregard for classification protocols, they need to be more careful about what sensitive information they provide. This isn't hypothetical diplomatic tension. This is real damage to America's intelligence-gathering capabilities that will take years to repair. There's also the broader question of presidential accountability and international law. For 250 years, American democracy has operated on the principle that no one is above the law, not even the president. But that principle has never really been tested at the international level. We've never had a situation where a former president's actions violated international protocols so seriously that global law enforcement felt compelled to issue a red notice. This creates precedent-setting questions about how American sovereignty interacts with international legal frameworks that America itself helped create. If Trump is allowed to ignore international protocols without consequences, what message does that send about America's commitment to international law? If the U.S. demands that other nations cooperate with Interpol and respect international agreements, but then refuses to hold its own former leader accountable when he violates those same agreements, the entire system of international cooperation becomes weakened. Other nations will rightfully ask why they should follow rules that apparently don't apply to American leaders. The danger of setting this precedent goes way beyond Trump. Every time a leader breaks norms or violates protocols without facing real consequences, it normalizes behavior that used to be completely unacceptable. It creates a new baseline where the next leader can point to Trump and say, "Well, he did it and nothing happened, so why can't I?" These actions don't just disappear when Trump leaves the political stage. They become part of the playbook for future leaders who want to test the boundaries of accountability. Democracy depends on those boundaries holding firm. It relies on the assumption that people in power will face consequences when they violate laws, even when it's politically inconvenient. When those boundaries start to crumble, democracy itself begins to weaken. We're watching in real time whether the international legal system has enough integrity to hold powerful people accountable, or whether political power can simply ignore international frameworks without real repercussions. Looking ahead to the coming months, the electoral implications are profound. We're seeing polling data that suggests voters care deeply about whether their leaders respect the rule of law, both domestic and international. The narrative Democrats will push is straightforward. Trump put national security at risk for his own ego, compromised international investigations, and now can't travel freely because he's subject to an international warrant. After years of chaos and constitutional crises under Trump, they'll promise a return to normalcy where American leaders respect both American law and international agreements. That message might resonate strongly with voters who are exhausted by constant drama and want stability. But here's perhaps the most stunning development in this entire saga. Warren Buffett, who has meticulously avoided political commentary throughout his decades as America's most respected investor, released a statement on February 8th that sent shockwaves through financial and political circles. Buffett wrote, "In 60 years of investing, I've learned that trust is the foundation of all valuable relationships between companies, between nations, between leaders, and their people. When trust is damaged, particularly in matters of national security and international cooperation, the costs are incalculable, and the recovery takes generations." The current situation with international law enforcement demonstrates why character and respect for rule of law must be prerequisites for leadership, not optional qualities. The fact that Buffett felt compelled to speak up tells you everything about how serious the financial and business community views this crisis. Buffett doesn't make political statements casually. He's watched presidents come and go, market crashes, economic booms and busts, and countless political controversies without weighing in publicly. For him to break his decades-long silence on political matters means he sees this situation as genuinely threatening to America's institutional stability and international credibility. His statement resonated precisely because it didn't come from a political partisan. It came from someone who's built his entire reputation on sound judgment and long-term thinking. So, here's the deal. A former president of the United States is now subject to an Interpol red notice, essentially making him unable to travel internationally without risking arrest. This isn't just about one man's legal problems. It's about whether America will hold its leaders accountable when they compromise national security and violate international protocols that we've committed to upholding. If Trump can carelessly handle classified intelligence, endanger international investigations, and face no meaningful consequences, then we're basically saying those rules don't apply to powerful Americans. That would fundamentally change how America is viewed by allies and adversaries alike. If the international community backs down from this red notice under political pressure, then we're stepping into completely new territory where American political power can override international legal frameworks that we've spent decades building. That makes every international agreement America signs worth less because other nations will rightfully question whether we actually intend to honor commitments that become politically inconvenient. It's about so much more than just Trump's travel restrictions. It's about whether we genuinely have international systems of accountability that function even when they implicate powerful leaders, or whether power ultimately trumps law when push comes to shove. The answer to that question will shape international relations and America's credibility for decades to come. So keep your eyes on this because things are just heating up. The legal proceedings are moving forward on multiple tracks. Domestic cases are still progressing, and now there's an international dimension that can't be controlled through American political pressure. Trump's team is scrambling to develop a response strategy that won't alienate the Republican base while also not further damaging America's international relationships. The next few weeks are going to be crucial. Stakes have never been higher. The evidence is stronger than Trump's team wants to admit, and the outcome is genuinely unpredictable. We're watching whether the system of international law and accountability can actually function when tested by someone who spent his entire career believing rules don't apply to him. This ride is far from